A very good morning. I'm presenting to you the African Union Observer Mission Report on the 31st July 2013 harmonized elections in the Republic of Zimbabwe. This serves as a preliminary statement. The chairperson of the African Union Commission, Her Excellency Dr. Zuma, deployed a 60-member African Union election observer mission, supported by the Deputy Head of Mission, Dr. Aisha Abdullahi, Commissioner for Political Affairs, my humble self, of the African Union Commission. Members of the mission are drawn from the Pan-African Parliament, African ambassadors to the African Union in Addis Ababa, election management bodies, and civil society organizations. The mission is supported by a team of experts from the African Union Commission, the Pan-African Parliament, and the Electoral Institute for Sustainable Democracy in Africa. Our long-term observers, 9 of them that had been in the country since the 14th of June, also joined the mission, making a total of 69. The African Union mission's observation of the 31st of July 2013 harmonized elections in the Republic of Zimbabwe adopted the long-term observation methodology, which covers the pre-election, election, and post-election phases. The first component of the AU mission involved the deployment of 9 long-term observers, the LTOs, on June 15th, who observed several components of the electoral cycle, including voter registration, candidate nomination, campaigning, voter education, the training of election officials, spatial voting, and other aspects of the pre-election phase. The second component was the deployment of 60 short-term observers who joined the long-term observers on the 23rd of July 2013. After their arrival in the country, the mission leadership met with the relevant authorities and various electoral stakeholders, including the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, presidential candidates, political parties, government officials, and civil society groups. The mission deployed 26 teams of observers to all the 10 provinces across the country to observe the final stages of the campaigns, pre-polling activities, and polling and counting in 350 voting stations. Election day findings. Drawing on the plethora of information gathered in the pre-election phase and based on its observations and consultations with a range of stakeholders, the AU Observer Mission hereby issues the following preliminary statement. A. On the general environment. 1. The poll was an important phase in a series of measures undertaken by the inclusive government under the terms of the Global Political Agreement of the year 2008, during which Zimbabwe approved a new constitution. The mission notes further that the new constitution, enacted in May 2013, contributed immensely towards the improvement of the political climate in the country for holding peaceful elections. 2. On the 31st of July 2013, Zimbabweans went to the polls with enthusiasm and in large numbers to elect their president, parliamentarians, and local authorities. The voting and counting processes took place in a peaceful and tranquil environment. Most of the polling stations observed by the AU mission opened on time and were generally fully staffed with all the required materials and adequately secured by the Zimbabwe Republican Police. 3. The poll followed a generally peaceful campaign period for which the mission commends Zimbabwean citizens and political parties who consistently conveyed messages of peace and non-violence to their supporters and the public at large. 4. The voting was carried out in an atmosphere devoid of violence, harassment, and disturbances. Section B. preparedness of the electoral management body. The mission notes that the institutionalization of an electoral management body in Zimbabwe, in line with African Union principles of democratic elections, has improved confidence in the integrity and professionalism of the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission to manage elections. The mission notes improvement in the manner in which the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission managed the logistics of the 31st July election after the lessons learned from the special voting process. The mission further notes the initiatives taken by the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission to recruit and train officials who were professional in the conduct of the process on the election day. The mission observes generally that from a historical perspective and in comparison to the 2008 elections, Zimbabwe has made an important transition in the conduct of its elections. However, the African Union Observer Mission also takes cognizance of several shortcomings in the preparations for the poll and on polling day. And they start to do. First, we look at the inspection of the voters' roll by the public and provision of copies to candidates. A. While sections 20 and 21 of the Electoral Act requires the ZEC to provide a copy of the voters' roll within a reasonable quote-unquote period of time, the mission notes that the final voters' roll was made publicly available only 2 days before the election, rather late for meaningful inspection and verification by voters, parties, and candidates to take place. B. Whereas the mission takes note of the rationalization provided by the Registrar General of Voters to the mission leadership in respect of the financial and time constraints faced by the Registrar General in compiling, updating, and finalizing the voters' roll within the limited time frames following the proclamation by the President of the Republic of Zimbabwe of the 31st July as the election date, it is our view that the reasons for the non-availability of electronic copies of the final voters should have been publicly communicated to ease the anxieties that have been consistently expressed by several stakeholders throughout the pre-election period. C. Given the strategic importance of the voters' roll to the conduct of a transparent electoral process, it is the mission's view that the Registrar General of Voters and the ZEC should have collaborated to ensure that all stakeholders were timely and regularly updated on the constraints and challenges relating to the voters' roll and efforts being made to rectify them to meet the 31st July deadline. The mission believes this could have minimized the persistent negative pre-election perceptions regarding the voters' roll. Further, greater transparency on the matter may have allayed fears raised by political contestants on the veracity of the voters' roll. D. The mission continues to express grave concerns about the matter of the voters' roll, despite assertions by the Registrar General that hard copies of the voters' roll were availed to all political parties other than for one political party. Observers have found no evidence that hard copies were generally available to all who required them and who by law should have had them. E. Related to this, the mission notes serious concerns raised by some stakeholders regarding the duplication and omission of voter names, which must not be allowed, casting doubts on the possible outcomes of the elections. The concerns about the voters' roll are critical in determining the degree of disenfranchisement or disqualification of legitimate voters from the voting. F. It is the mission's view that the voters' roll should be made available on time and displayed publicly in accordance with the law. Section D. Printing of ballot papers. The mission notes that the number of ballot papers printed, 8.7 million papers precisely, corresponding to 37% above the number of registered voters, was significantly higher than international best practices, which is about 5 to 10%, and raises concerns of accountability of unused ballots. It is the mission's hope that they will accomplish the task of accounting for the ballots, the satisfaction of stakeholders and all interested parties. H. The mission further notes that a significant number of local government ballot booklets had missing ballot papers and were not solidly identified. One such case was noted at a police station at Townhouse, where 2 local government ballot booklets had only 99 papers instead of 100. Section E. High incidence of voters turned away. The mission notes with great concern the high incidence of voters who were turned away at polling stations. Illustrative of this widespread phenomenon, in a polling station in Gwanja, Matabeleland South, 85 voters were turned away. Reasons adduced by polling officers varied from voters appearing at the wrong vote and names not found on the voters' roll. Section F. Late publication of final list of polling stations. The late publication of the final list of polling stations, barely 48 hours to the opening of polls, may have contributed significantly to the high number of voters who were turned away for being at the wrong polling stations and or redirected to other polling stations or referred to the command centers. AU observers generally noted the recurrence of this phenomenon in various polling stations they observed. It would have helped to allay the fears and reduce agitation about possible disenfranchisement if they would make the if they could make public the total number of eligible voters that could not exercise their civil rights. At the time of observation, 97 voters out of 317 were assisted. Katambere Primary School, 77 voters out of 374 were assisted, and Vore Primary School, 85 voters out of 374 were assisted. Furthermore, at a polling station observed by the AU mission in Manikaland, there were 97 assisted voters out of a total of 370 voters. While the current electoral rules, I take this again. While the current electoral laws provide for assistance by presiding officers, electoral officers, and police officers, the involvement of such officials may influence or restrict the free. The mission knows that the media was highly polarized along party lines and generally biased in their reporting, in clear violation of Article 160J of the Electoral Act. The mission reiterates that the state broadcaster could have provided a balanced platform for all competing parties and alternative choices and alternative voices in accordance with Article 17, Section 3 of the African Charter on Democracy, Elections, and Governance. The African Union Mission hereby clarifies that this is a preliminary statement based on observations and consultations undertaken until the end of the polls. The mission will therefore continue to observe the process until its conclusion, when a final assessment will be made. The African Union long-term observers will remain in the country until the 3rd week of August 2013 to observe the post-election phase. The African Union Mission will release a detailed final report with recommendations that will be shared with the Zimbabwean authorities and availed to the general public through the African Union website within a 2-month time frame. Conclusion. The mission wishes to express its hope for a successful conclusion of the 2013 harmonized elections and urges all electoral stakeholders in Zimbabwe to continue to communicate messages of peace and non-violence to sustain the reigning calm political environment. To this end, it is critical for all contesting political parties to pursue the established legal channels and dispute resolution mechanisms resolving arguments that might arise. I thank you for listening. Thank you very much.